And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mr. Dubey, the Joint Secretary of the Ministry of Civil Aviation, who has very kindly agreed to join us briefly. He has an urgent meeting to attend. I'm going to, in fact, jump over the speakers and ask Mr. Dubey to share his thoughts. And also, if he has any thoughts and questions, we'd be very happy to hear him because we don't want to lose the opportunity of listening to the policymaker with a new policy which has gone all over the place as far as drones are concerned. It was broadcast everywhere. So over to you, Mr. Dubey. A quick um, introduction. Mr. Dubey comes from the private sector. He is now with the government as a joint secretary, Minister of Civil Aviation, and I can say under his leadership, we've seen phenomenal amount of work that has been done by the ministry. Of course, and congratulations to him and his team for coming out with a new policy which makes ease of business very, very doable, and it sort of gives a lot of encouragement to the drone industry. Mr. Dubey, over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Jai Hind, everyone. And Mr. Harry, Dhaul, thank you so much for that kind introduction. I'll not take too much time because whatever had to be said has already been said. And the very fact that we released some rules in March and within a space of 4 months, we have repealed it. This is the first legislation under the current government which has been repealed. Otherwise, we've seen many other laws and acts coming and a lot of big, huge vote banks protesting against it. But the government, once it decides, generally sticks to its laws. This is the only, and here the drone industry is not even a vote bank. It just shows that it is the sheer intellectual power and the future growth potential of this sector which creates the real vote bank. And this will, in fact, become a vote bank in the future. So it's beyond the vote bank politics, and it is the sheer value of the idea whose time has come. That, as was said by General Pannu and General Sharma also before me, this is the technology of the future. This will be the future, not just of aviation, but of agriculture, logistics, mining. I mean, I could just rattle off some 100+ sectors, which in fact will be, I would actually challenge people to tell me a sector where this will not have a role. So this is the power. It's like electricity. It'll be like commodity. So it was felt that the rules that we came up with in March were not in line with national interests, and hence around mid of May, we were told to repeal it and come up with a new set of rules. We asked for December. It was rejected. We asked for 2nd October. It was rejected. And finally, we were told by the big boss that 15th August it is. And then in 3 months' time, we normally, the previous laws took 11 months to build. And it also involves back and forth with the law ministry, with the 7-8 other ministries, NITI Aayog, PMO, CAPSEC, so on and so forth. So typically it takes about 10 to 11 months to come up with any legislation. There's also a public consultation part, which is about 30 days, and then again legal, and then finally the Hindi Anuvad. So normally it's about a 10 to 11 month process, but we were given on 15th of May, we were told 15th of August. That's just about 3 months, June, July, August. So, and glad to say that it was actually done. And it just also shows that, once Indians are given a tough target, generally we are considered as very lazy, puddu kind of people, incompetent, big at talk. As they say, we should make India the head of NATO. NATO stands for no action, talk only. We talk, very little action. And but once we are given a stiff target and we have a tough taskmaster on the top, Indians can surprise the world. So in 3 months, all those convergence of ideas between different schools of thought, pro-growth versus pro-safety security, and then the public consultation, and then the analysis of some 1,200+ suggestions which came, and then the law ministry approval, and then the Hindi Anuvad. Then all that was done by 13th of August and given to the PMO. The PMO, of course, the events overtook us and the Afghanistan incidents and stuff. So it took us some time to get the PMO approval. Finally, on 25th, we got the approval. The same day it was gazetted, and 26th, you saw the announcements about 2 days back. So this is the way the government now works. If something has to be done, it has to be done. Our immediate next focus is to now get the airspace maps in, because that's a critical part of our security ecosystem and planning, that we have to divide the Indian airspace into the green, red, and yellow zones. I'll not go into the details because I know there's some very, very far more capable people speaking after me Rajan, Smit, and various others on the policy, so they will be able to explain better. But these airspace maps have to be now developed by over some 40 plus agencies, which include the state governments and the UTs and the 2-letter, 3-letter word agencies across MOD, MHA, and various others. So that will be done over the next 30 days. It's in the rules. So we have time till only 25th of September. And then in the next 2 months, by 25th of October, we also have to come up with the UTM policy, the unmanned traffic management, which will help us understand how to manage those lakhs of drones which will fly in the air with those 1,000-odd aircraft that we have, both commercial and private jets and helicopters, and both have to coexist in the same Indian skies. So it's going to be a nightmare, but then it's good to have nightmares, and that leads to better planning, better controls, and inshallah we should not have any negative incident, because generally negative incidents are always used to put roadblocks in the name of progress. We also talk about safety and security as if that is anti-growth. It's not actually. If today people fly casually in the manned aircraft, the Indigos and the SpiceJets and Air India, they fly because it's the safest mode of transport and fastest mode of transport, and also very safe even during the COVID time. So people happily fly there because they know there any other mode of transport opens up to more risks, and because this is the shortest mode of transport, so people fly. So safety actually leads to growth. So it's not that growth and safety, and this is what we were told by our visionary leadership, that we generally treat them as a growth lobby and a safety security lobby. What we've been told is that these actually work in tandem. And if if we become a Yemen or a Syria or an Afghanistan, imagine what will we be? So today, because we are in a safe and a secure environment, thanks to all our brothers and sisters on the defense ecosystem, the MODs and the armed forces and the various agencies, the soldiers without uniform. These are the people who keep us and our family safe, so that on a Saturday we can very nicely have 2 cups of tea and get on this conversation and chat with each other and discuss how we can make a nation stronger and better. Okay. Also, that issue about the Jammu thing again. Jammu was used as if like, and there's another funny thing which I think many of us know, but it's worth talking again, and then I'll shut up because I think I've run through my time. When Jammu happened, I saw we were very interested. Intrigued and also little taken aback and also amused. It was a mixed feeling with the sort of debates that happened on each of the newsreels and the fly-by-night operators plus armchair experts that now the drone industry will be clamped down and all that. And you'll be very surprised to know that this happened. The Jammu thing happened on 27th. I think there was a Saturday or something. And Monday, 29th of June, we had this presentation, which was decided almost like 3-4 weeks back, because PM's presentations are decided weeks in advance, and they have multiple rounds of checks and balances before your presentation goes to the big man. And that was on 29th. And some people did feel that it will be slowed down and clamped down. The reaction was just the opposite. They said that the Jammu incident happened in the current rules, and the current rules were turned by the industry as draconian, difficult, too many forms, too much of paperwork, approval of all the Mai Baap Sarkar at each step. So the Jammu incident happened in the previous rules. That itself showed the complete disconnect between criminal acts and the rules that are written for the nice guys. So the rules are typically written for the nice guys, and that's what you saw on what was notified on 25th August. This is designed to be easy, simple. Some 25 forms have been reduced to 5. Some 72 fee items have been, because if you remove the forms, each of the forms has multiple fees and stuff, and then renewal and all that. So, and also across sizes. So you have different fees for different sizes. All that is gone, and 72 fee items is now down to just 4. And if you read the fee items, also it's almost as cheaper than a samosa, because we just charge for a pilot license, which can earn you almost 30, 40 or 50,000 a month. We're charging 100 rupees. The government is charging you 100 rupees for 10 years. So per annum cost is just about 10 rupees. We do a present value per annum would be just about 6 rupees. You can't even buy a samosa from Chandni Chowk that price. So this just shows the intent of the government, that how much respect the government has for this sector. This is the future of India. We missed the aerospace revolution. We were far behind the Lockheeds and the Boeings and the Airbuses. And that will take us some time to catch up. But on drones, we feel it's almost like the software revolution of the early 80s, thanks to the Narayan Murthis and the Ramadurais and the Wipro person Premjis. So this is that leapfrog moment for us. We have huge faith on our youth. We have strangled them or shackled them for the last 3, 4, 5 years. And now the shackles have been broken with the intervention of the PM himself on 25th of August. So now we look up to our youngsters. We are there to support them. They are the ones who will create the India of the future. They'll do the leapfrog. And in the drone industry, we feel by 2030, we should be a drone hub. Even the normal passenger aircraft, these Indigos and SpiceJets will all become pilotless. In fact, the pilot cabin itself, the cockpit itself will vanish, and we might even put in some 10, 12 seats there and earn more money. So this is going to be the
Mr.
future.
Dubey, I
I'll
have a
stop here,
question
and
for
if there are
you.
any questions,
Yeah. There's a quick question. You see, with the new drone policy, the question that will be very important for this forum is number one, how do you deal with unregistered drones within the country? And secondly, are you allowing drones from countries like China and Turkey also to be imported? Specific question.
Right. So first question was about what do we do under the current rules? We are saying we'll do nothing under the current rules because, as I mentioned earlier, these rules are for the nice guys. The bad guys anyway don't follow our rules. So the Jammu chap who did it, that gentleman did not follow the US rules 2021. Give us his Aadhaar number or passport. Otherwise, we would have traced him. So these rules are now moving away from, as we have said earlier, also moving away from the aircraft rules. So see, this is how policy evolves, and especially in an unknown technology which has huge positive and negative ramifications, the government generally tends to be a little conservative to begin with. So they were very close to the aircraft rules. And then gradually the policy shift has happened, and we are taking it closer to the motor vehicles rules. So just like automobiles, I mean, you can use an automobile to create a car bomb or attack the parliament or do a bank robbery, molest someone. You don't shut down the car industry just because some criminal, a bad guy used the car. It's the same logic here.
So basically, what you're saying
So
is.
let me complete that point. I'll not take long. Harry, just give me a second.
Sure. Go ahead.
All we're saying is these rules are for the nice guys, the guys who are going to speak after us, the Smiths and the Rajans who we look up to with great hope. These rules are meant for them and to simplify things. For the bad guys, we have all our 2-letter, 3-letter, and 4-letter agencies who'll take good care of them. The gentlemen and ladies who might be on the other side. For them, we have IPC, CRPC, and various other rules, and we'll give them a good treatment based on those. These rules are for the nice guys. That was question number one. Question number two was imports. Yes, of course. Now it's in the rules. There's a clear rule which says that made in India products and NAVIC, which is our equivalent of a GPS, will be promoted. But then we are also not going to be with blinkers on that in the name of Bharat Mata Ki Jai and that Atmanirbhar and all that, just shut down all doors, because we have to be very, very practical. What we've been told by far wiser people is that MOCA's job, the Ministry of Civil Aviation, which I work in, our job is only on the growth and the safety side. Security is done by somebody else, so please don't do their work. Similarly, on the trade issues, global trade is a very, very complex subject with so many laws, bylaws, and global treaties, etc. That is not MOCA's competence. That is the competence of the Commerce Ministry. Under Commerce Ministry, we have DPIIT, which works very closely with all the startups. They have the startup regime and the Digital India, Startup India, etc. DPIIT is the one which looks after export, imports, and about startups. And under that, they also have the DGFT, the Director General of Foreign Trade. Now, to begin with, we cannot just clamp down and say, "Bas, so Bharat Mata ki Jai," and shut down all Chinese and Turkish and this drone and that drone. That will not happen. It will be a gradual, calibrated process. Let's not also forget, and we were told, that the same country from where you stop the drones is also where maybe 70, 80, or 90% of the components come from. You stop one, they'll stop the components. We are finished. We are back to square one. And then again, sheepishly, we'll open up the gates. So, see, this is a public forum, and this whole thing is being recorded. So let's just have faith in the government. There is a clear rule which says Atmanirbhar Bharat will be promoted. It's in the rule. So it's not just a wish list. It's in the rule. And we are going to be supportive. And that's why a law has been repealed purely to support the Indian industry. But we're not going to be rash and emotional about bas ye band kar do, wo band kar do. It will be a calibrated approach.
Excellent. So basically, for all the players who are looking at securing the skies, now the challenge will be that we have to widen the horizon and make sure that we cover all kinds of drones from all kinds of countries, including those who may not be friendly at the moment. But what is your thought process on fabricated or innovated or wooden, model type of things which can become dangerous? Any thoughts on that as drones?
Yeah, so Harry, I'll again be repetitive. This government works on the NOMB concept, none of my business. So
Hmm.
MOCA's business is not to secure. This is done by our brothers and sisters from the other ministries and agencies. They are doing a
Okay.
fantastic job. They are fully seized of the matter. We will not get
Yep.
into, as I said, for them, we have IPC, CRPC, and the other agencies.
Fair enough. Any other questions because Mr. Dubey has to take off. He's a busy man on a Saturday as well. Shows how hard he's working. We appreciate that, sir.
Yeah, just
Okay.
one small point. There's also this big talk about the PLI because we want to somehow get money into the sector, the startups. Of course, I mean, they're working on their own savings and their father's money and borrowed from friends and well-wishers. We need to pump money in. The PLI is under active consideration. We just have to fill up some forms and keep on pursuing. So I just thought I'll share that as well. And in fact, we may
No.
go back to I mean, Harry also part of the Droneacharya group. We are in. I mean, this must be one of the few WhatsApp groups where we have direct, seamless communication and rapid communication between the industry, academia, the agencies, the ministries, the regulators, and that's a very useful forum. So I just thought I'll share that, and we'll again come back to the FICCI and the DFI for their inputs to get this. The PLI thing in, and last but not the least, these trackers. So for trackers, you would have seen my various sarcasm-laden posts that we now want the industry to come up with those regulations. We are saying you draft the regulation. Who are we? I mean, do we understand even the D of drones? I would say I just understand 1% of drones. 99% of the knowledge resides with the industry and all the gentlemen and ladies who are on the screen right now. So we're telling them, you draft your regulation, you give us your draft regulation. Of course, we'll run it past the law ministry and other 7, 8 other ministries and Niti Aayog, and we'll come back with some minor changes. But with 80% of the rules and the regulations will be exactly what you tell us. So now the challenge, this is a very different kind of a government where we tell industry to draft the regulations. Let it be self-regulated. Harry?
Thank you. Thank you. Fantastic. Uh, just before you go, can you just tell others who are not members of Droneacharya what is PLI?
Okay, that's the production, my apologies, production linked incentive, which is a scheme by which we are pumping money back into the people who manufacture in India. Manufacturing has been one of our biggest weaknesses. We have to clean up 75 years of shit. Our policies were not geared for manufacturing, and sooner or later we had to compete with China. So they make something for $100 and transport it all the way from Guangzhou, Shandong, or whatever from Shenzhen into India, and it still works out 30% cheaper. It is a game of mathematics. If I were a businessman, why would I? I mean, why would I buy an Indian-made phone and not one of those Redmi's and Vivos and Oppos and all kinds of Chinese phones?
Yep.
Because they give me the same capability at 40% cheaper. So somewhere we messed up, and now our generation has to clean it up so that our children and grandchildren at least have a level playing field. We have to pump money back. So PLI is one such way. Now, of course, PLI also gets criticized. Kya dal rahe ho yaar, aap kya 1%, 4% ka bhig de rahe ho kya? So let's not forget that the government also coffers. I mean, does our money come from? It's not that we produce goods and services. We collect taxes. We are the tax collectors from you. You make money, you give us a share of that money, and through that money, we pump something back to you. We pump money back into infrastructure and then into our security and safety and various other social objectives. So right now, money is a little short. So let's start with that 1 to 4%, 5%. There's a threshold. Suppose you made 100 drones yesterday, last year, and the next year, as you go from 100 to 200, so depending on how much extra that you made, certain portion of your revenue is given back to you as a production linked incentive. So the more you produce, the more incentive. Basically, we give you money back. And what is this money? The money anyway, the taxes which come to us. So, but
Thank you.
collects money from everyone and puts money in the hands of people who manufacture more than the previous year. Harry?
Thank you. May I, at this point,
I have a
thank
question
the.
for Amber sir, if I may ask.
Yeah, who are you? Can you please identify?
This is Amit Nichani here from Ascom Systems, Mumbai. I have a question for Amber sir. Sir, with regards to the DGFT, are we expecting a new notification from them where it is clearly mentioned that the drone components and the ready-to-fly systems would be restricted and allowed respectively?
Yes, absolutely. They anyway have the systems in place, and drone imports and components imports are anyway coming under the new rules. The components has been completely freed up because this was a big demand of the industry. So components will be quite free till such time that we build our own ecosystem for supply for manufacturing of components. Completed drones is where we'll first in a calibrated way allow it, and gradually will ramp it down as Indian industry comes up and starts producing equivalent products at roughly the same price, or maybe even a 5 or 10% costlier. Because don't forget, other than the manufacturers, we also have to look at the end users, which is our military itself. No, let's not forget, even the military uses DJI drones. They say, as long as I use a Chinese drone to kill Chinese or keep an eye on the Chinese, how does it matter? So even our military, our Indian oils and the NHAIs and the Indian railways, all our end users, the pipelines and mines, Coal India Limited, they all use some of the foreign drones. The moment Indian drones come up to that level, there also we are telling most of the government agencies that please first try. And so even on Swamitwa, if you see, many orders were forced, they were forced to give to Indian players. It's only if you realize that your particular use case is not getting, or your expectations are not being met by the Indian players, that you should go for the import route. So gradually we'll ramp down the fully built one, just like we did in the automotive sector. But components will be relatively freer.
So are we expecting your recommendation to go to DGCA?
Amit, I'm sorry.
There are many speakers now. I think let's respect them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. May I thank the Joint Secretary, Ministry of Civil Aviation, Mr. Amber Dubey, for his very interesting intervention. May I now move to the head of FICCI, Mr. Rajan Luthra, who's one of the major players. Over to you, Rajan. And he's a major player in the drone industry and also heads the apex body of FICCI on drones. And over to you, Rajan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me over at this event. I think the focus of the discussion today is the policy and regulations and the associated security issues and how do we deal with them. Before I begin, just a clarification here. I'm representing FICCI and the body that has a dedicated drone committee where we are supporting many of the initiatives that are being taken up over the last few years. In parallel, there is a second drone working group that I lead that has been created under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry for the drone sector specifically, to provide our inputs as one of the 24 sectors where a scale committee has been set up to interface with the industry and propose specific recommendations on how do we promote Made in India, promote Atmanirbhar Bharat, and also some of the recommendations like the PLI scheme for the drone sector have been made as recommendations by the drone working group on behalf of the drone sector to the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. If I could maybe now spend a few minutes in trying to address some of the concerns and in my day-to-day working role where I'm working with Reliance Industries for the last 22 years, and some of the security related threats and challenges, we have been aware of them for the last 5-6 years. And we are equally concerned about the threat from the rogue drones as well. I think first of all, the current rules have done a very fine balancing act between the security concerns on one side vis-a-vis the opportunity that India has to genuinely become a drone hub of the world. And I think it's an immense fact that the amount of pressure that was just outlined by Shri Amber Dubey on the government for making security as a primary concern rather than focusing on the growth of the drone sector. That had been the case for the last almost 6-7 years, and now we are finally allowing a very transformative sector to grow because the applications are huge and the opportunities for leveraging drones are immense. Coming specifically to safety and security related concerns, and I think I would ideally like to maybe even get into answering some specific questions. First of all, I think these are not an either-or question. We have to have the drones being flown by all the authorized and the approved people to derive value from drones on one side. In parallel, we have to assess the security-related risks and concerns from the rogue drones, and we have to address them not only by the MHA or the MOD, but also by each and every one of us who are responsible for the security of our assets. I'll give you specifically three aspects here. One is the counter drone systems themselves. The counter drone systems have been in place for the last more than a decade in most of the installations. They are now being finalized for all the airports and most of the other critical infrastructure, both in the defense, in the government, and in the private sector. And we see out of the 300,000 crore cumulative opportunity for the drone sector in India, we see almost a 50,000 crore opportunity for the counter drone segment as well. The counter drone segment, there are larger global players, but also there is a good amount of development now happening within India for providing a counter drone capability, whether it's the RF scanners, whether it's the RF jammers, or the wide variety of both the detection and the soft kill or the hard kill countermeasures that are in place. Apart from the counter drone systems, which obviously can range from a very small RF detector to a very, very complicated system around an airport or a refinery or any of the other critical infrastructure. There is a second aspect which is there in terms of the defining of the zones, especially the yellow zones or the red zones, which the critical infrastructure will fall under. And for being able to fly in any of the red zones is obviously prohibited on one side, but you need to take permissions from DGCA to fly into the red zone. And with combined with the no permission, no takeoff rule that was already in place and which hopefully will get mandated once again, we are in a position to make sure that no authorized drone is able to fly into from a geofencing capability into the red zone or the yellow zone without permissions. Then there is a third aspect which deals with the remote ID and tracking, or the real-time identification and tracking of drones. This, in my view, is possibly something which will be able to address the concerns that the security and defense establishments have. The threat you rightly pointed out, somebody rightly pointed out earlier, is from not only the state actors or the larger drones which can act like missiles, like the attack that happened in Saudi Aramco facilities. But I think the threat is more from the more than 600,000 drones which are already available in India, which can be retrofitted with an IED and then can cause huge amount of damage, most likely similar to the one that happened at the Jammu Air Force Base as well. Now, let's take a scenario where each and every drone has been registered in the Digital Sky platform. It has the ownership identified. And number two, it has a beacon that gives the location, the altitude, the speed of the drone, along with the unique identification number of that particular drone, and continuously beams it into the Digital Sky platform for the law enforcement or the asset owners to be able to realize whether a drone flying in their vicinity is an authorized drone or not. This simplifies matters tremendously for the security agencies, and this is something which I believe we have already at FICCI deliberated with most of the industry stakeholders, and we have submitted a draft white paper, which we are now working on to try and do further consultations and come back with a specific recommendation to the Ministry of Commerce and Ministry of Civil Aviation, rather. These measures put together: one, the zoning and the compliance of the zoning; second, the NPNT; and third, the remote ID or the remote beacon for tracking of each and every drone. These three should be able to give a very comprehensive set of capabilities for miscreants, let's say the so-called petty miscreants, for not being able to engage in any of the malicious activities. Then we are dealing with the terrorist-related activities, which in any case, the rules as was outlined by Mr. Dubey, they in any case would not follow the rules. And there I think we in any case have the capability to detect a drone that is flying based on the scanners and the counter-drone systems that I talked about. I would maybe take a pause here and be open for any questions.
What are your suggestions for the anti-drone industry since it's going to be open house now for retrofitted drones. Any ideas on how we can detect and do a soft kill or a hard kill or whatever?
So I think these are two separate issues, Harry. Number one, the counter drone systems will need to detect and mitigate the risk from any rogue drone, right? Even if it's an authorized drone, but it has some malicious payload, and it is now taking or rather ignoring the red zone guidelines, then you have to counter that as well. Number two, so you need a counter drone system that can use, let's say, whether it is radars, whether it's RF scanners, whether it's any of the other technologies to detect and then to interdict the rogue drone using soft kill measures like jamming the RF signals or GPS jamming or jamming even the, let's say, or taking over the control over the drone. The hard kill measures are a wide variety of about 7 or 8 specific hard kill measures are available. From DRDO to many of the Indian companies are now getting into the manufacturing of the counter drone systems. The remote ID and tracking is actually for being able to track, like you track each and every aircraft that's flying in the air. We have an opportunity for the drone sector to not get into the legacy of the aircraft, which actually cannot be tracked in real time. If we are able to genuinely track each and every drone in real time, the threat perception can be mitigated in a significant manner.
Fair enough. So, how do you suggest the anti-drone industry look at the red zone point is well taken. How do you suggest that the industry could look at spotting and removing these drones which don't have any kind of signature because it's a low noise, low heat, it's a micro drone or whatever?
No, extremely good point. And I think that is something that we have been personally grappling with for the last 3 to 4 years as to when a radar cross section of let's say a DJI Mavic is about 0.01 or 0.05 square meters. How do you detect that at an adequate distance to be able to initiate the countermeasures? The requirements thereof are that today there is technology in the radars as well as the RF scanners available. And there are not just one, but multiple capabilities available which can track these drones 5, maybe even 10 kilometers away. Obviously, the larger the radar cross section, the larger the RF signature. I'm now assuming that the drone is not even giving out an RF signature, right? That it's not being controlled. So it's an autonomous drone. It has a pre-programmed mission. It's now getting towards the target, but the radar should still be able to detect that. And after the radar has detected that, you can have an electro-optical IR camera looking at the drone. The biggest advantage here that the remote ID would provide is that if you have 10 drones in your vicinity and 9 out of them are giving you the authorized signature that I am so-and-so, the one that is not giving you a remote ID obviously will become a very likely malicious drone. So I think in that sense also, the remote ID capability helps in the security countermeasures being more suitably defined.
Fair enough. Do you want to say anything else or should we move to Smit?
I'm done. Thank you.
Smit Shah runs the Drone Federation of India. Very privileged to have him on board. I think some of the critical points that Rajan has made from the point of view of not just being the head of FICCI, but for the drone section, but also from the point of view of being actual user, having worked in Reliance. One more question, Rajan. Do you have any concepts for critical infrastructure like refineries and others to creating some kind of a dome, secure dome for anti-drones?
Very much so. And I think we have taken the best practices that were laid out by the Ministry of Home Affairs a couple of years back. We have used that. We've used the best practices from some of our global partners as well. And we have created a very detailed RFP that we have issued to some of the larger players in the sector. And we are currently evaluating almost 6 to 7 of those players extensively on the techno-commercial parameters. And I think the key thing there is the ConOps being defined. Now, the ConOps for a refinery would be very different than a ConOps for an Air Force base or a ConOps for an airfield itself. I think we have different agencies trying to fine-tune their concept of operations of how they would react if a malicious drone is detected. Now, the challenge here from a regulatory perspective that needs to be addressed is that a private sector agency cannot jam or cannot take countermeasures against the rogue drones, right? So we need to have the capability of after you have identified a rogue drone has entered your facility, some capability like a trespasser, right? You need to have the mandate being given to some private sector players to even initiate some of the, let's say, not just a soft kill or not just a hard kill, but under what scenarios do you authorize the players to take an action against the rogue drones? That is one of the policies we need to debate in future.
Fair enough. One last point. How effective do you think is the present technology to detect these micro drones which are not exactly registered or known?
I believe at least 5 to 6 players, the one that I mentioned about, each one of them has the capability to detect even a nano drone at a distance of more than 3 to 4 kilometers.
Okay, let me ask Sam. Sam, a quick question. Sorry for coming in the wrong session, but since you're online, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I think, thank you very much, first of all, having me. In fact, it really terrain dependent as well. If it's an open area in the border, you can go very far. But if it's a city, then it's a different challenge. So I think generally along the concept of detection, radar, RF, but really need to test it out. And how about new drone that comes using 4G? That will be a bigger challenge as well, which I will mention about it. So drone technology moves so fast, counter drone trying to catch up.
Okay, thanks. Rajan, this is a point which I was going to ask you before letting you off the hook is what happens if the guy comes in with a frequency which is not known to be for coming on drones? I mean, what happens? He changes the frequency. How do you detect him?
So most of the RF scanners actually have a very wide frequency range that they can cover. Number one. Number two,
to detect him.
To detect them. Number one. Number two, even if he's not communicating on any RF frequencies, they can still detect him using the radars. And I think more than now, beyond radars as well, it has to be a combination of these detection capabilities. To some degree, I think there will be a threat of, let's say, if there is a completely, like in case of, for example, Saudi Aramco, you can detect things from a very far wide range, as Sam also mentioned. Whereas in our case, if there is somebody in a nearby village who the drone takes off in 500 meters, we have to be able to detect and respond even in that short a scenario, right? So I think it depends on asset to asset. It depends on the specific security risk assessment that has been carried out. And accordingly, you can change your concept of operations. The technology is available. It's now the implementation that is to be taken care of.
One question that came up when we were doing a security audit of a facility was, what do you do when, in fact, two questions. One, what happens if there's a friendly drone of yours going and there's another anti or an unfriendly drone coming in? How do you spot the difference, or do you jam them both?
Yeah, so I think this is where the complicated scenario comes. I'm actually taking your scenario even further. What happens if there is a swarm of drones? You have your own drones flying. Let's say you have your own, the so-called Blue Force drones flying in the air, few of them. And then you have a fleet of swarm drones coming as red zones, right? So that's the kind of simulation one would want to do. I think the capability of the countermeasure system, this is where the brain of that so-called dome that you talked about comes into play. That brain should be able to handle at least 100 or more simultaneous threats. Only then is it a capable system for a real critical infrastructure protection.
Okay. Rajan, that is useful. Please hang in there. Don't run away. I'm going to ask Smit. Smit, tell us from the Drone Federation of India point of view, what is it? What is the new scenario with the new policy, and what is the anti-drone industry going to have in terms of challenges? Over to you, Smit.
Thanks, Harry, for having me over. Very wonderful to see so many people discussing the important subject. I'll just take a step back and try and explain a bit more on the existing drone policy. Just allow me to share my screen.
Yeah. Smit, is very important that you explain to us, because if you're planning anti-drone, you need to know what the drone policy is. That's a starting point, right? So I'm grateful to General Panu for curating the conference in this manner, that we actually first want to figure out what the drone policy looks like before you get into anti-drone. Go ahead.
So just very quick 3 slides. So when we talk about the entire drone and the anti-drone ecosystem, we need to understand very specific airspace. As per this policy, these are some not to scale sort of representation. The airspace will be divided into 3 zones, which is the green zone, yellow zone, and the red zone. And typically, if we do see that the yellow zone has this kind of a step structure, which is that distance between 8 to 12 kilometers from any operational airport, there will be some more leeway given to the lower airspace, which is 200 feet, which will also be the green zone.
Smith, question. Is it 3 kilometers or 3 nautical miles? What are we talking about?
Kilometers.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is 8 to 12 kilometers, where airspace up to 200 feet will be green zone, and everything beyond 12 kilometers will be green zone. And we'll have restricted areas or airport premises and the area around that, which will be probably red zone. And then the area, this is area where you are not supposed to go. Next is the area where probably you could have a conflict with a manned aircraft, which is the yellow zone, typically up to from 0 to infinite height till 8 kilometers, and then the stepped green and the yellow zone. So
sorry, Smith, to interrupt you. The funnel for an approaching aircraft would be approximately 6 to 7 kilometers, actually 6 knots, 6 nautical miles, right? So what are you saying? Just to clarify, that is red zone or a yellow zone for drones?
So Harry,
because
if you do see, typically with the funnel approach at about 5 or 6 kilometers will be way beyond 1,000 feet. So if you do see the numbers in the diagram here, up to 4 or 5 kilometers, it probably would be red zone. This is something that has not been published, but just an estimate. Up to 8 kilometers, it will be a yellow zone. So in a yellow zone, you cannot fly without any permission. And beyond 8 kilometers, there will be, a part of the area which will be the lower airspace, which is the green zone.
Okay.
So that's the stepwise approach. So very important to understand this perspective that, while we debate about safety and security, this diagram clearly indicates that the area where manned aircraft is not supposed to come in, even including the emergency situations, which is including the emergency procedures, not a accident, but the emergency procedures is an area which is green zone, because there is absolute no normal procedure or emergency procedure defined, because of which there will be no encounter with manned aircraft. There is no permission required to fly in green zone.
Okay.
The yellow zone, where you can have conflict with manned aircraft either while climbing or landing or during cruise, which would be beyond 400 feet, is all yellow zone now. In the previous regulations, the regulations in itself were till 400 feet, but the very important salient feature that the government has recognized and has also opened up is that everywhere in India you can fly. The red zone is no longer till 400 feet, it is till infinite height. Yellow zone also till infinite height. And the green zone is up to 400 feet, beyond which it is treated as the yellow zone. So the government, in fact, apart from all the various other features as well, has taken another bold step to say that there can be a provision for drones to even fly beyond 400 feet. Obviously, that can only happen with permission.
Okay. Smith, here is a challenge for you, okay, and for Rajan. There are lots of airports which have hills around, okay? You're talking about 200 feet AGL, which is, above ground level. So the hill is about 500 feet or 1,000 feet above the airport, right? He's sitting on the hill, complying with the 200-foot zone, and he steps out of the hill area. Then what do you do?
Harry, this is where the airspace design and the entire airspace marking will come in. As I just said, this scenario that I depict is for the 95% of the cases. In this very rare scenario, obviously there will be a separate operational design and airspace traffic design where
Point taken, sir. Point taken. Go ahead.
And the beauty of this is, Harry, including this airspace, the government also says that there will be temporary red zones and various other features where the digital sky is now so interactive that, let's say, there's a VIP movement, not just the fixed design of an airport in an uneven terrain, but there's a VIP movement or there's a Kumbh Mela kind of an event. You have the digital sky that will give state governments a power to generate an area as a temporary red zone for up to 72 hours. So till 72 hours, it's a red zone. And after that, obviously, if there's a requirement to extend it, then you can, mark it for anything again up to 72 hours. That also helps ensure that there is no over creation of a red zone, because all the temporary red zones will be time bound and they have to expire compulsorily by regulation. So that's
no, Smith, sorry. I very exciting, but I just want to ask you a question. What happens if you are in a blind spot in the terms of detection of your platform, and the drone is to fly from point A to point B, but actually he deviates and goes to point C, or at least on the track. What do you do? And you can't detect him.
So Harry, that will typically come back to how the drone is built, whether it is built to fly visual line of sight or beyond visual line of sight, whether it is
beyond. I'm talking beyond vision.
I'll come to that. Whether it is built to fly autonomously or remotely. So key parameters when we talk about drones, it's very important to understand visual line of sight, beyond visual line of sight, as well as remotely piloted or autonomous. If my drone is supposed to fly beyond visual line of sight but remotely piloted, which means it has RF and the communication link breaks, the primary fail-safe procedure will either bring it back or put it in a holding pattern or land it with a parachute. This is a classic example of how zipline drones fly. So when zipline flies in Africa, in Rwanda, typically to do healthcare deliveries, the drones that they control have only 3 controls. Either they go into the nearest holding pattern, they keep circling in a particular area, or they land up immediately, they just pull a parachute and land there and there. Or the third command that they have is return to home. The drone takes a circle and comes back. So it's very important. And with this policy, the beauty is that all types of drones, whether autonomous or remotely piloted, whether visual line of sight or beyond visual line of sight, all of them are under the ambit of the regulation. And the next slide that I do show will, sort of give more clarity on the point. Which is we need to now start comparing the drone rules, while all the parts of safety, security stay, while all the parts of aviation do stay. But typically, logically, it's now closer to the automotive sector. So any car that you buy has to be type certified. You cannot buy a car that is not certified. So that's the first block, type certification of drones by QCI approved certification entities. With the type certification, there is a basic deemed safety that gets attached, that the unmanned aircraft has been tested, has been checked, and conforms to minimum safety requirements. Yeah. And the manufacturer himself also claims that the next 10,000 aircraft or the 1 crore units that he will build will conform to the approved design. So that's the type certification, analogous to a car certification. Next is the registration of the car, just like we have a license plate. In this case, we'll have a unique identification number, which is the drone registration. So that's how you have a certified drone and then a registered drone. Next, when we talk about the other safety aspect, which is the person who is going to be controlling the drone, he requires to be submitting all his passport, Aadhaar card, and various identity, documents. Passport, by the way, being one of the most strongest documents, which is not very easy to fake and do all sorts of mischief. While nothing is impossible, but for the major lot, it's not possible. The pilot has to undergo drone pilot training. There is an exemption for some category of drones that I'll come to. But typically, the person who is flying the drone has to undergo training and then has to get a license. So in first case, that equipment safety was defined by the certification of the drone and then the registration. In this second case, the pilot who is going to control the drone, its safety is by drone training and then drone pilot license, which is also its registration. So now the equipment is deemed safe, the pilot has been trained, and both of them are registered and they are in the system. The last is in case of any damage, who does take the responsibility? So an insurance is required as per Motor Vehicles Act and other provisions as well, which is the third-party liability insurance that you need to have. So now your safety is covered, security is covered, both of the equipment and the person, both of them are registered. You have a third-party liability insurance. Now you need to go on the Digital Sky platform and see if you are in the green zone, yellow zone, or the red zone. If you are in a green zone, no permission required, up to 400 feet, obviously. If you're in the yellow zone, a different type of permission required. Red zone, another different type of permission required. By the way, all of this can be verified as well as checked on the single platform Digital Sky. So let's say if we want to fly in a red zone, I will still be making an application as an operator on the Digital Sky. I don't need to run around everywhere, and that's the beauty of this regulation. And yellow zone, typically the same thing. Yellow zone probably would have just the ATC approval. Again, I'm just commenting my view on this. And red zone might have another set of central agencies that may also be giving an additional.
So I have a question, Smit. Yes. What happens? Recently we are witnessing a trial in Bombay for the traffic wallahs, and the question asked was, what happens if something goes wrong with the drone and it falls down and hits somebody? So what is the situation on third-party insurance?
So Harry, about 3 odd companies have started giving in third-party liability insurance. In fact, more than 3 companies have started giving it. With these rules, maybe they might just tweak their products a bit to ensure compliance with Motor Vehicles Act or various other provisions. But insurance, third-party liability insurance on drones has started. Insurance policies have been issued already. Yes, they will need refinement. There will be claim scenarios and all of that. But that's with any new industry, and we'll have to look at that.
Okay. Your second point, we were again witnessing some trials in an Naxal area on behalf of the police, or with the police rather, and we found that the drones were coming unregistered. The drones which are not going to be registered on the Sky platform, coming in, and in fact they were observing the police force, and so the police were very uncomfortable. Of course, they tried to shoot them down; it didn't work. But what's your thought on that? Where does this go now?
So Harry, imagine this: you are an aviator, and you've been an aviation buff, so you understand ATC and all of that, and many other esteemed colleagues understand too. What is the power that an ATC has? They have a radar, and then they have a screen that shows all the blips flying in the air. With this, every law enforcement agency, every concerned authority will have access to some sort of a dashboard which can show two things. Till remote ID is not up, which I will add to what Amber sir and Rajan, Luthra also said, that it is a very important subject and we need to quickly work on that and bring it in. But even without that, every time when I am flying either in a yellow zone or in a red zone, I have to register my flight plan or the flight envelope, which means if Harry, you were guarding a very important area, which is in the red zone or the yellow zone, for you, the simple standard operating procedure would be on an everyday basis. If you were not briefed about the 10 drone flights that were supposed to happen in your area and you spot a drone in the air, you automatically have to consider it as deem rogue.
Correct.
So very important to understand that if you're the person who's guarding, you might be someone who's the head of a facility, or some very simple patrolman who's, patrolling the perimeter of the facility. The principal SOP that you should have is, did I get a list of approved drone flights in my area of interest in the morning today or in whatever, timeline that would define a previous day at the night? Or
understood. I agree with you. I'll tell you where my mind was meandering. In fact, I'm looking at blind spots which are not on the radar and guys who are not registered. That's what I was looking at in terms of the challenges we face in the future.
The idea here is that, just like aircrafts, right? The moment we see something which is not compliant, the first thing that we do is we, send out warning. Then we deploy, if nothing happens, we deploy,
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. Only question is, these guys are not in an area where you can detect them. They're sitting in the forests.
Take a shot at that.
Sure, Rajan, go ahead.
Your point. See, I think today most of the technologies in the counter drone system are available in a portable version also, right? So you have even a man pack systems available. You have van mounted systems available. So let's assume that you are even in a let's say an Naxal infected area and you have a patrol party going there. They ideally should be carrying at the very least an RF scanner, maybe even a man portable, which has the capability to detect even a small drone, which can be a rogue drone, in their near vicinity. And as we know that if you are not expecting any drone flight in that area, if it's not a green zone, right? So then you should assume it to be a rogue drone and you should take the countermeasure that are deemed fit. So I think that ConOps is something we can detail out, obviously, case by case.
Okay.
Exactly. And Harry, just one more point to add there, which is, as Mr. Rajan very rightly mentioned, very soon when we have the real-time tracking of drones, including the green zone, if you were patrolling in a green zone, you probably would get an access to, if you were, sort of a temporary operation or something like that, you would temporarily get access to some sort of a, a mobile app or some sort of an interface with the digital sky data that even if you were patrolling in a green zone, you would know whether a compliant drone is flying over your head or whether it is a rogue drone. So that's the additional advantage that the...
Are you insinuating or suggesting that we'll have an ADSB on every drone that gets registered?
Definitely no, because ADSB, even ICAO has said that, they have moved away from the recommendation of ADSB, but various technologies, and I'll make the point, and then probably Rajan, if you wanted to make another point as well. Depending on at what height you're flying and what kind of operation you're flying, it will either be a cellular-based technology or any other, SATCOM-based technology. The primary purpose opposite to what is in aircraft is not to broadcast your signal in the environment around you, but to report your signal to a central. Here, the aircraft usually broadcasts its ADSB out signal, and then it's the other aircrafts and the antennas that catch that signal and then take it to a central location, which is very unorganized because many infrastructure, many equipments, many third parties doing it in various parts of the country. Here, you will either probably use a SATCOM technology or a simple cellular network to not broadcast your signal in the environment around you, but to report it to a central server. Now, you are reporting it to a central authorized, cloud, from where this data pipeline can be given back to all the compliant players. So, in fact, Harry, this would be as simple as imagine there was no ADSB, there was a SATCOM-based tracker on all airplanes. Now, your SATCOM-based tracker will send out a command to the satellite. The satellite then beams it down to the respective ATCs. And obviously, the ATCs will now have a digital dashboard. Obviously, in the case of aircraft, this wouldn't work out because other aircrafts also need to detect, other aircrafts.
They do. In the United States, they do.
Yeah, definitely.
They have also got TCAS for traffic collision.
Yeah. So, but that's the analogy. Drone tracking will be more reporting based, not broadcast based. Rajan, if you want to add.
But do you think the satellites can detect the drone, small drones?
No, let me I think clarify it in a slightly simpler manner, Harry.
Yeah.
We are saying there are two methodologies which have been debated world over of how the drone remote ID can be broadcast or can be transmitted over a network.
Okay.
It's either called the broadcast or the network ID, and different countries are taking different positions on that. Our recommendation is the broadcast capability, which is typically similar to the ADSB, is a legacy technology. Today, we have 99% of the country's population covered with some kind of a telecom network or the other. And beyond that, right, there are multiple. So we are saying it does not matter on which network you, let's say, transmit your position and your altitude and your speed to a central location, as long as you do it on any of the available networks, or even on Wi-Fi, or even on, let's say, you give it to your ground control station and the ground control station transmits it back. You have the location available. Now, there may be a very, very remote chance of a drone flying in an area where there is absolutely no network. And in that small instance of a few minutes or whatever period of time, that is the only limited threat. But 99.99% of the time, you would have the location of every single drone available in real time in the digital sky, and the digital sky can give it to any authorized nodal officers of the state or central government agencies.
Rajan, that's perfect. Nothing wrong with that. In urban centers, for example, is lovely. I'm just trying to visualize that the challenge that our counter drone industry and security agencies are looking at, and I'm just trying to play the devil's advocate, if you like.
Sure.
As to what happens if you are in a blind zone. For example, central parts of India may not have the kind of radar which will detect a drone. It doesn't have a cellular network in the Naxal areas, for example, or maybe in some hilly areas, for example. And it's not a registered drone which is flying. So I'm just trying to visualize what is it that the anti-drone industry needs to factor in to make sure that.
Yeah, I think good point. And I think in that scenario, which is, let's say, in any case being dealt with by the law enforcement and the paramilitary forces, those agencies have both options available to them. Number one, they have access to the location of all the drones which are transmitting their network ID, number one. And they can see any ones which were reported to be flying in their area, if it's a yellow zone or a red zone. Number three, in any case, you have your man-portable or vehicle-mounted RF tracking available. Because if you're saying that a drone is still being communicating with its base station, right? That's a majority of the cases in a central India scenario will have a control station somewhere nearby. So the RF detection would be able to detect it, and then you can presume it's not broadcasting its network ID, so it's a rogue drone. So you are then have your authority to take care of it.
Yeah, and just to add a point in that, Harry, the primary premise of the counter-drone solution has to be detection, identification, and neutralization. What the compliant players actually help is, so you getting access to digital sky platform or some way of adding the data of the compliant players is just eliminating the good actors out of the bad. At the end of the day, whether it's a good actor or a bad actor, there are different types of rogue drones, and they can come in. So from a deployment and an equipment perspective, the capability still has to be there. Now, whether to act on it or not, that confidence will be much more strengthened if you also have access to all compliant players, so that before acting you will have digital sky input and you will know, okay, I don't need to act on this because this is a good player. Even without
it's like identification of friend or foe.
even without the identification of friend or foe, the capability to retaliate still has to be equal. Whether to retaliate or not is the difference. That helps. That is being helped by the friend and foe detection. So
okay, guys. Sorry, go ahead. Your third slide. You had 3 slides. You said.
That's it. I think the last slide was just about exemptions, which is certification not required for the nano category drones, which is 250 grams, because all of them mostly are toys or probably will be used for recreational purpose. And pilot license is not required for all these, 250 gram analogous drones. They may be used for recreational purpose again and all of that. But however, all of these drones, even if they are small, they still need to be registered. So we are not, ignoring them completely. The government probably will still have a repository of information. Only that these toys don't require certification, and to fly them in a very limited sort of capability, you don't require pilot license. That's the exemption from the general set of explanation that I did give.
Great. Rajan, a question for you. Do you guys have an anti-drone forum? For example, who can manufacture anti-drones, since the jammers are very sensitive issues? Do you have a forum that is recommending policies to government on what should the anti-drone industry look like?
So within FICCI, Harry, we are looking at the counter-drone segment, typically originally under the Homeland Security Committee. That's where we had, but now as part of our market assessment that we have done a market assessment ground up for every single installation. So I think what we would possibly maybe as an action point forward, we could collaborate with some of the people present on this thing to take it, take up a specific, maybe a closed door event, which can deliberate on some of these points further. We are also planning to conduct some trials of the remote identification and tracking kind of devices, where some of these scenarios could even be played out and simulated.
Sounds good. All right, guys. Any questions from the audience? Good panel discussions.